Well, I say you came here for more 40K Brunch gossip, where the tea is piping. It's just today, the tea is a little terrifying. I'm just glad you came on up to my spire. If you enjoy this, please turn on that notification bell, subscribe, like, and give me a comment where in the Imperium you are listening and watching this from. Now let's get into this, because we are talking about a very terrifying Xenos I heard about from one of my friends in the Inquisition Order Xenos, and this one's about the Tyranids. Like I said, this tea is terrifying, so let's go into it. Now, before we begin, don't you be telling secrets out of school, okay? My friend in the Inquisition would be very unhappy if he heard I was telling these tales, okay? So, now, about the Tyranids, they're like a bug, mammal, hybrid. They're all bioweaponry and angry and hungry for everything, ever evolving, ever changing, ever adapting for any situation they need. And they consume whole planets of their biomass, from the smallest microbe up to us. We are biomass. Now, first things first, honey, nobody knows where they came from. They're an existential threat to our glorious Imperium, bless the Emperor, and they just waltzed in from outside our galaxy for like a relative who was uninvited to a holiday, right? And some folks whisper they've been eating their way and tossed the entire universe, and our Milky Way is next like a 3-tier wedding cake, just ripe and ready for the picking. It's very spooky, and there are many different forms of Tyranid, but they're all genetically similar, and they'll create different forms with different adaptations depending on what it is they're facing, right? And they rove the galaxy in massive ships called hive ships, and they travel differently than us. They have this like little critter that creates a hole in space and just drops them in another area of space, but it can take them a while in sublight because it's not very exact. The problem is, what I was told is that we cannot communicate with a planet they are approaching because of their hive mind, because they're all part of a hive mind consciousness that leaves this shadow in the warp that prevents warp travel, faster than light travel for us, and communication between planets. And so the next thing you know, all the astro telepaths on a planet will just lose their mind because they can't telepath out to ask for help. And then the skies will turn dark as they rain down in their pods and their ships to start consuming the planet. Now, the spookier part is sometimes there will be other vanguard creatures called gene stealers that'll wind up on a planet well ahead of a hive fleet and start creating cults, gene stealer cults, and breeding with the population, kind of like sleeper agents. And people will flock to these cults thinking that the Tyranids are gods coming to uplift them to a next existence. And so when the hive is getting near, those gene stealers will appear out of nowhere and start sabotaging everything that they can and unaliving whole important officials, generals, everything. I know. But let's get down to what we know and where they first came, because evidently the first hive fleet, because again they come here in big old hive fleets, was Hive Fleet Behemoth. Now let's start there with their big debutante ball, as I like to say, their grand entrance. Hive Fleet Behemoth came storming into the galaxy from like the eastern fringe. Their first big fight was McCrag. You know, the home of the Smurfy boys, the Ultramarines. Don't get me wrong, they are very sweet from what I've been told. Now this Battle of McCrag happened at about 7:45 M41. Right? And Lord, those bugs swarm like old Terran fire ants on spilled sweet tea. Those Smurfs, the Ultramarines, honey, barely survived. And only by sacrificing half of their chapter. Can you imagine? Oh my goodness, thank goodness we're safe here on Holy Terror. Now, ultimately, they were destroyed by the Ultramarines and the Imperial Navy, but they had a certain tactic. They would use brute force and overwhelming swarms and frontal direct assaults. Now, the Hive Fleet Behemoth was defeated from what I was told, okay? Now we're going to move on to what I think is Hive Fleet Kraken was the next encounter with the Tyranids, and my goodness, it's scary. Yes, you see, Behemoth wasn't the only one. High Fleet Kraken was next, and if you thought Behemoth was something, it was just an appetizer. Cause you know what? High Fleet Kraken was sly. It didn't come in with just no brute force. No, honey. It came in a full-on, several-pronged attack. Right? It split itself into different tendrils across the galaxy, went in a whole divide and devour type of situation. Right? It even went so far as to attack one of them Eldari craft worlds. Almost plumb ended it. Almost those Eldari, they got their wigs snatched, baby. Barely survived. Barely survived. And because they were so wily, they attacked multiple planets, and they were only defeated when multiple tendrils were cut off piecemeal. Though there are still allegedly some splinters somewhere, baby, but we finally got rid of them. The next one, though, baby, now that one's a whole other kettle of fish, baby, because that one's called Leviathan. And that one, baby, that's a real scandal, because Leviathan, unlike Behemoth or Kraken, it came knocking like they did. Leviathan slithered up from underneath. That's right. It came up from the galactic south side. And it is the largest Tyranid swarm to come today. This is why, because all the Tyranid swarms come from different parts. People think that there's a greater high fleet. These are just like Vanguard probing into our Milky Way. Makes it all the more spooky. Now, they came in from up there's the galactic plane, right? They came from up down below, and they formed a two-pronged assault on the galaxy, causing mass devastation on a massive scale. Unfortunately, from what I told, and my inquisitor friend was very uncomfortable talking about it, it's still active. Now, we got real lucky, baby, because they were trying to make Holy Terror its main course. But thanks, potentially, though he is currently persona non grata right now, to Inquisitor Critman. You see, Inquisitor Critman did some things he probably shouldn't have, and determined a way to stop these mad Xenas. You see, he had his biologists create toxin to unalive a whole chunk of the fleet, and it did, but they adapted. However, it did not stop them. They continued on. So he did the greatest, most biggest heresy. Well, not heresy. He was being very practical because, the Tyranids eat everything in order to create more of themselves. So what he did is he created what's called a fire break. He exterminated whole systems, or tried to evacuate some exterminatus whole chunks to create a fire break between a Leviathan and the rest of, here, Terra. Spooky stuff. Untold trillions of citizens of our glorious Imperium were lost in this attempt. And it worked for a little bit. But then he went a step further, baby, because of that he was deemed persona non grata, baby. He was carta exterminus, and he was stripped of his title. But he kept on working. He used his own private death guard, and then took a gene stealer. Those are the ones I talked about earlier, and sent it over into Orc territory in Segmentum Ultima. I think that was where it is. Another area where the Orcs are, causing High Fleet Leviathan to be fighting the Orcs. Now, if you know anything about the Orcs, they continue to breed because they're kind of like mushrooms, unstoppable, very strong, and the Tyranids continue to eat. So it's like a vicious cycle, right? It's a vicious cycle, and it's a currently ongoing conflict, and we don't know who's going to win, right? Well, we just hope that it's the Orcs, kind of, because if the Tyranids have the Orc strength, who knows what could happen. That's some spooky stuff right there, baby. You see, that's very spooky stuff. Now, you may think, with all three of these fleets acting so differently, you think that's all total chaos. No, but there's a hive mind, like I mentioned earlier, because these little buggy animal things, these critters, are guided by something bigger, and it's that hive mind. Think of one big mean brain hovering over the swarm as their conscience all fused to create one, and if you get too close, well, maybe, like I said, that's psychic chatter. Right? Psychics get all twitchy and communications go faster, and they continue to evolve and adapt depending on the situation, right? You may defeat one way, but you better not hold your breath because more will come out fireproof, right? And that's the problem with these Tyranids. They pose a big old threat to our glorious Imperium, and so we are basically one all-you-can-eat buffet to them, and they're a continuing ongoing problem that hopefully, glory be to the Emperor, we will cure, and we will figure out what it is we need to do, because there's not a civilization in existence that ain't threatened by these creepy crawlies, maybe except for the Necrons, because they're all metal. From what I heard, you know, the Necron, they leave the Necrons alone because they're all metal. What are they gonna eat, right? Now that's kind of what I've been told about the Tyranids in a nutshell. They're big old hungry bugs that ever adapt, ever grow, ever change. There's a lot of lore, baby. And if you enjoyed this quick synopsis of it, baby doll, please continue to listen, subscribe. That is that little synopsis, that juicy tea. But if you want more long form content on this, consider looking at one of the other channels like Luton09 or Wes Hammer. They go into much greater depth. I'm just giving you the overview. I'm giving you the tea, as it were. So come on back when I talk about the Adeptus Sororitas. So remember to turn on that notification bell, and if you like my content, comment. Consider supporting me at my Patreon for as low as $3 to $5 a month. Patreon.com/ShiningNathan. As always, glory be to the Emperor and the Imperium.